Maureen, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the January 29th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Thank you for joining us today. The highlights under business and finance are: the Fed entered a new holding pattern on interest rates and signaled little urgency to resume cuts after contentious reductions at officials' three previous meetings. Gold leapt to a record, and U.S. stocks finished mixed, with the Dow inching higher by less than 0.1%, the S&P 500 slipping less than 0.1%, and the Nasdaq rising 0.2%. Tesla reported a 61% drop in profit for the fourth quarter and said that it would plow $2 billion into xAI, Elon Musk's private artificial intelligence firm. Meta Platforms reported record sales for the fourth quarter and a massive increase in projected 2026 spending as it proceeds with an ambitious AI expansion. Microsoft reported better than expected earnings for its fiscal second quarter, propelled by its new deal with OpenAI, and posted revenue of $81.3 billion. Amazon.com said it would cut around 16,000 corporate employees, the latest step in the company's efforts to reduce its workforce. Barry Diller approached Warner Brothers Discovery last year, expressing interest in buying CNN, though no serious action was taken on the inquiry, and it wasn't communicated to the Warner board. Starbucks reported growth in same-store sales across its regions for the 3 months ended December 28th. First Brands secured an emergency cash infusion from some of its largest customers to keep the bankrupt auto parts supplier afloat. Now for the key articles from the worldwide section. 2 Border Patrol agents who fired shots at Alex Preddy in a fatal encounter in Minneapolis last weekend were placed on administrative leave. Following the shooting, Trump and his aides are rushing to limit the political damage and shift their strategy in Minnesota. A new video emerged of an earlier altercation in which Preddy appeared to kick in the tail light of an SUV occupied by federal agents. Senate Democrats laid out their demands for an overhaul of immigration enforcement days ahead of a deadline to pass a $1.3 trillion package of spending bills that would avert a partial government shutdown. 2/3 of voters ages 18 to 29 disapprove of Trump's priorities and approach to foreign policy, according to a Wall Street Journal poll. FBI agents searched the main election office in Fulton County, Georgia, seeking records related to the 2020 presidential election as the administration presses efforts to re-examine Trump's loss. Mayor Mandani said New York City is facing a $10 billion projected deficit and will push state lawmakers to raise taxes to close the hole. China approved purchases of NVIDIA's H200 artificial intelligence chip, authorizing their supply to several of the company's Chinese customers. U.S. asylum was granted to a man who fled China after gathering evidence of alleged human rights violations against the Uyghurs. The picture on today's front page shows an Israeli flag draped over a coffin in the back of an open, large vehicle where 3 soldiers are guarding it on each side as 2 young girls are bending over to kiss the coffin. And that caption reads, "Painful chapter. The casket of Ran Gwilly, whose remains were finally brought back to Israel, was loaded into a hearse in Meitar on Wednesday. The 24-year-old police officer was killed while fighting Hamas militants during the October 7, 2023 attack." And that headline reads, "Israel mourns last hostage returned by Hamas." Other front page articles follow. Fed holds interest rate steady. Central bank offers little clarity on when easing will resume. 2 officials wanted cut. By Nick Timiraeus, Washington. The Federal Reserve entered a new holding pattern on interest rates Wednesday and signaled little urgency to resume cuts after contentious reductions at officials' 3 previous meetings. The decision to hold the benchmark federal funds rate steady in a range between 3.5% and 3.75% was approved on a 12-2 vote. Fed Chair Jerome Powell said recent data had painted a somewhat brighter picture than officials had at their last meeting, with stronger economic growth and tentative signs of labor market stabilization. The comments suggest officials are comfortable staying put for some time until new signs of labor market weakness emerge or inflation convincingly makes progress toward the Fed's goal. We're not trying to articulate a test for when to next cut. What we're saying is we're well positioned, Powell said at a news conference. The decision, widely expected by investors, barely registered in markets. Major stock indexes were little changed, and the yield on the benchmark 10-year Treasury note edged up to 4.25% from 4.224% on Tuesday. Without further labor market weakening, the next cut might not come until after Powell's term as Fed chair ends in May. Trump playbook backfires in Minnesota by Annie Linsky and Alex Leary, Washington. President Trump rose to power in real estate, reality television, and politics following a simple creed in moments of crisis: cede no ground, never admit mistakes, and attack. In the hours after a federal immigration agent shot and killed a 37-year-old intensive care nurse in Minneapolis, the president's top advisors followed their boss's playbook, and it backfired. Now Trump and his aides are rushing to limit the political damage as they point fingers and shift their strategy in Minnesota. The administration's harsh language, top officials called Alex Preddy a domestic terrorist who was trying to massacre law enforcement agents, has been replaced with calls to ease tensions in Minneapolis after weeks of high-profile standoffs between protesters and federal officials. Trump is planning to instead focus on fraud in the state and ratchet up criticism of state and local leaders, according to administration officials. The president criticized his own administration's on-the-ground commander during the shootings, calling Greg Bovini a pretty out-there kind of a guy. Trump's softer tone has left senior immigration officials in the White House and the Department of Homeland Security trying to explain why they offered inaccurate descriptions of the facts on the ground after Preddy was killed. A preliminary government report sent to Congress this week, along with bystander videos from the scene, contradicted their version of events. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's advisors have privately expressed frustration that she has taken the brunt of the blame for the administration's response to the shooting, according to people familiar with the matter. Shortly after the shooting on Saturday, Noem asserted that Preddy approached federal agents with a handgun and attacked them. She also accused Preddy of domestic terrorism, alleging that he wanted to inflict maximum damage and kill law enforcement. Noem has received bipartisan criticism, with some Republicans calling on her to step aside and Democrats demanding her impeachment. Several other senior administration officials, including White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, made similar allegations about Preddy. Tesla plows $2 billion into XAI as profit drops 61%. Tesla's EV sales declined 16% during the quarter from a year earlier. By Becky Peterson. Tesla reported a 61% drop in profit for the fourth quarter and said it would plow $2 billion into Elon Musk's private artificial intelligence firm, moving forward with the investment in XAI after a non-binding proposal to fund the startup failed to garner enough shareholder support. The company said it entered into an agreement on January 16th to invest in XAI Series E funding round. Tesla shareholders had previously voted on a non-binding proposal that asked the board to invest in the startup, which got more no votes and abstentions than yes votes. SpaceX invested $2 billion in XAI, a competitor to OpenAI, the Wall Street Journal previously reported last year. Musk also announced the end of production for its Model S and Model X, higher-end vehicles which have seen sluggish sales compared with its other EVs. Tesla will use the Model S in factory space in Fremont to manufacture Optimus robots, the Tesla chief executive said. There's still obviously many who doubt our ambitions for creating amazing abundance, but we're confident it can be done, Musk told investors. The EV maker reported $840 million in net income, down 61% from the year-ago period. Earnings per share were 50 cents, beating analyst expectations of 45 cents. Tesla's revenue fell 3% in the fourth quarter as the company lost its lead as the number one world's electric vehicle maker to China's BYD. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal and the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Dollar's big decline poses risks to U.S. prestige business earnings by David Uberti and Chelsea Delaney. Caro Turkaki shielded her clients from a big risk in December when the Oregon Travel Advisor locked in a 10-person group's upcoming 5-night stay in London at the then exchange rate. Since then, the value of the dollar has plunged. If the dollar changes, your hotel costs go up. With me, you're locked in, Turkaki said, adding that the currency's recent weakness has added to pressure on less affluent Americans hoping to go abroad. Those aren't the folks I'm seeing right now. The dollar's slide to its lowest level in years has renewed fears about the U.S.'s preeminent position in global markets, spurred conflicting statements from the White House, and shifted the math behind everything from international travel to U.S. corporate profits to European furniture exports. Wall Street is betting there will be more weakness to come, potentially ending a years-long run in which the dollar has far outstripped many peers, enticing investors the world over to park more money in the U.S. The dollar's strength over the past decade was propelled in large part by American exceptionalism, or the outperformance of the U.S. economy and markets compared with the rest of the developed world. Political stability and strong rule of law gave overseas investors, such as Japanese life insurers and European pensions, extra reason to snap up U.S. assets. That pushed the stock market higher and helped Americans access cheaper loans to invest in homes or businesses. At the same time, a stronger dollar afforded consumers more purchasing power to buy goods and services from abroad, sending hordes of U.S. tourists to the Eiffel Tower and sun-bleached Lisbon. Now the dollar is still strong by historical standards and remains the globe's reserve currency. But the intensity of the move in recent days, as well as President Trump's comments about the path forward, has given investors more reason to hedge their bets on the U.S. The world is not ready, said Stephen Jen, Chief Executive of London-based asset manager Horizon SLJ Capital, who is expecting another 20% decline in the greenback. The level of the dollar was and still is way out of balance. The currency last year posted its worst annual performance since 2017. Trade shocks and signs of a slowing economy sparked a sell America trade that dinged U.S. assets. While stocks and bonds recovered, the dollar remained lower, weighed down by fears that a debt-burdened U.S. is scrambling the global order, underpinning its own growth. A doom loop of deflation traps China's economy. Exports drive growth, while competition from overproduction hits prices. By Hana Mayo, Shanghai. Hundreds of vendors at Shanghai's largest clothing market were busy, but they weren't making sales, they were processing returns. At Kipu Road Wholesale Clothing Market, wholesalers send shipments of sweaters, dresses, and pants to retailers all over the country. Stores pay for what they sell and send back what they don't. Lately, vendors say little sells. On a recent weekday, delivery men dragged trolleys stacked with returned clothing through the halls. Vendors tallied the piles. Wang Xingjing, a women's wear wholesaler, estimated her 2025 revenue was about half what she made the prior year. Before the pandemic, business was strong enough to hire 4 employees. Now she has only 1, and even that feels like too many. The 40-year-old mother of 2 teenagers said she no longer splurges on the occasional luxury bag and instead lives frugally, ordering cheap takeout from food delivery apps. Ordinary people have no money in their pockets, including us, she said. Across China's economy, consumers aren't spending enough and producers aren't making too much. That leaves companies all along the supply chain earning less. Many feel they have no choice but to lower prices to unload inventory, eating into profits. With less money on hand, businesses are limiting wage growth, pausing hiring, and shedding employees, which means workers have less to spend, continuing the cycle. Other articles within the paper follow. A Battling Hall of Fame Snub by Jason Gay. Bill Belichick won 6 Super Bowls with the Patriots, but won't be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Bill Belichick getting snubbed by voters on his first attempt to make the Pro Football Hall of Fame is very silly, but let's not act too surprised. Hall of Famers have a rich tradition of turning into petty ministries, thick with politics, blowhards, and baffling decision-making. I stand by all of this until the unlikely event someone wants to induct me into a Hall of Fame, in which case I think it's a fabulous idea. Thank you. Belichick will get in soon, of course. If he feels melancholy about this delay, the grumpy lobster boat captain should put on the 6 Super Bowl rings he captured as the head coach of the New England Patriots, plus the 2 he won as an assistant with the New York Giants. He should look in the mirror at his Chapel Hill lair or his Sconset cottage and do a little shadow boxing, a style pow, pow, pow. There are other coaches in the Hall of Fame. There's not one with a wheelbarrow full of Super Bowl rings. ESPN, which broke the news, reported that the first ballot denial, Belichick didn't receive the necessary 40 of 50 votes, followed deliberations of the infamous Belichick era, Spygate and Deflategate, cheating imbroglios, misunderstandings. The network cited a source who stated that the Wait a Year protest was Spygate-centered and led by a Patriot nemesis, ex-Indianapolis Colts general manager Bill Polian. Polian denied that to a Sports Illustrated reporter. That is totally and categorically untrue. I voted for him, then told ESPN he wasn't 100% sure if he voted for him. Meanwhile, there's the delicious intrigue that Patriots owner Robert Kraft, who was on the same ballot as Belichick, will be elected instead of his former hire, with whom Kraft parted ways following the 2023 season. Young voters are souring on Trump. President is losing support with those 18 to 29 after drawing the group in 2024. Week after week, images of Israel's military pummeling Gaza filled broadcast and social media, and President Trump was losing patience. By Terrell Wright, Eliza Collins, and Alex Leary. People are getting sick of turning on the TV and seeing you bombing everything, Trump said in a call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The young people don't like it. Trump's private remarks last year, recounted by a person with knowledge of the conversation, came as his standing with young people plummeted during his first year in office. After nearly winning the group in 2024, roughly two-thirds of young voters ages 18 to 29 now disapprove of the president's priorities, including the approach to foreign policy and immigration, according to a recent Wall Street Journal poll this month. Elisa Morales was all in for MAGA. The 21-year-old cast her first presidential vote for Trump in 2024 and built up Republican credentials, leading her Indiana College Turning Point USA chapter as vice president and serving as a national committee woman for the College Republicans of America for the state. But after seeing videos of deportations posted by Trump administration officials and the killing of Alex Preddy in Minneapolis, Morales, a granddaughter of a Mexican immigrant, says her support for Trump is at a low. She said she is disturbed by Trump's foreign entanglements and left her post at TPUSA, the youth outreach organization funded by Charlie Kirk and the College Republicans of America. This is not the party I once signed up for and registered to be in, said St. Mary's College Jr. From U.S. Watch. Journalists granted asylum in U.S. A federal immigration judge on Wednesday granted U.S. asylum to a Chinese citizen who fled his homeland after gathering evidence of alleged human rights violations against China's Uyghur population. News last month that Heng Guan had been detained in upstate New York by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement sparked an outcry of support for him from members of Congress, human rights groups, and the State Department. Beijing denies widespread evidence of abuses against the mostly Muslim ethnic Uyghur population and takes a hard line on critics of its policies. The Department of Homeland Security has the right to appeal the decision within 30 days, so Guan remains in a New York detention center for now, said his lawyer. An email to ICE requesting comment on the decision wasn't immediately answered. And that was from James T. Aretti. Amazon to lay off 16,000 corporate employees by Sean McClain and Garrett Vipers. Amazon said it would cut around 16,000 corporate employees, the latest step in the technology giant's efforts to slim down its workforce. The first round of cuts in October led to around 14,000 white-collar employees receiving pink slips. At the time, people familiar with Amazon's plans said the company was targeting around 30,000 job cuts, around 10% of the corporate workforce. As I shared in October, we've been working to strengthen our organization by reducing layers, increasing ownership, and removing bureaucracy, Beth Galletti, the company's senior vice president of people experience and technology, wrote in a blog post announcing the cuts on Wednesday. While many teams finalized their organizational changes in October, other teams did not complete that work until now. The layoffs come as job growth in U.S. enters one of its slowest patches in years. Economic concerns and trade disputes have led many corporate chiefs to say they are postponing hiring decisions. Advancements in artificial intelligence have also led companies to try to do more with fewer workers. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the editorial page, Guan Heng gets U.S. asylum. A judge grants refuge to a worthy dissident. No thanks to DHS. Here's the best news of the day, and about immigration, believe it or not. On Wednesday, a judge granted asylum to Guan Heng, the Chinese man who risked his life to expose the Communist Party's human rights abuses. We've been telling readers about the plight of Mr. Guam, whose asylum claim is as strong as it gets. The 38-year-old read about Chinese ill treatment of ethnic Uyghurs from foreign sources on the internet, and he traveled to Xinjiang province at great personal risk to see for himself. He gathered photographic evidence of the re-education and detention camps where the Communist Party imprisons Uyghurs. Mr. Guan then risked his life to make it to the Americas. After fleeing China via Hong Kong, Ecuador, and the Bahamas, he set sail in October 2021 for Florida on a flimsy inflatable boat, scheduling the online release of his evidence in case he didn't make it to shore. Shortly after his arrival, he requested asylum, and the U.S. granted Mr. Guam a legal work permit in 2022 while his asylum claim was pending. Yet, Immigration and Customs Enforcement arrested Mr. Guam in August after encountering him by chance, and he's been in a jail in upstate New York since. Mr. Guam would face imprisonment or worse back home, where Chinese authorities have harassed and threatened his family. Beijing would seek to extradite or kidnap him if he were deported to a third country. The Department of Homeland Security says its immigration crackdown has focused on the worst criminal migrants, but its treatment of Mr. Guam is one example of how its enforcement has been far more indiscriminate. Despite the merits of his case, DHS never supported his asylum claim. Even after Wednesday's ruling in his favor, Mr. Guam still hasn't been freed from detention, as DHS is reserving the right to appeal. Mr. Guam could be released immediately if DHS backs off, but he may have to wait until the government's 30-day appeal window is over. The Bureau's bloody-mindedness, even after Mr. Guam's case was widely publicized, is further proof that DHS needs new leadership. Thanks to Judge Charles Auslander for his asylum ruling, which shows the U.S. can still be a beacon for liberty and a refuge for dissidents from the world's cruel authoritarians. From the opinion pages, midterms aren't Dems to lose, and they may. Bashing Trump and pandering to the kooky left is hardly a winning formula. By Karl Rove. In midterm elections, the party that doesn't hold the White House almost always makes gains. That's especially true when the president's approval rating is underwater, which means Republicans should be worried. Donald Trump's approval is 42.7% in the Real Clear Politics average. Consumer confidence is dropping, and the terrible mistakes in Minneapolis have hurt him and his party. Yet all this doesn't guarantee a smashing victory for Democrats in November. There's time, more than 9 months, for Republican fortunes to improve. More important, Democrats have their own problems. Many of them think that attacking Mr. Trump for every action and word is sufficient. It isn't. The attacks must be linked to a Democratic agenda that addresses issues Americans believe affect their lives. Blindly bashing Mr. Trump every day lets the president choose the terrain. Democrats must have a plan that allows them to attack him deliberately on turf more favorable to them. It doesn't help that so many Democrats are screaming for Mr. Trump's impeachment. Republicans overreached in impeaching Bill Clinton in 1998, and Democrats didn't do themselves any good when they impeached Mr. Trump twice in his first term. Swing voters know 2/3 of the Senate won't vote for impeachment today, so they see calls for removing Mr. Trump as more partisan politics. Time spent demanding impeachment is time lost discussing what will move swing voters. Independents want to know how Democrats would improve the economy and why their paychecks haven't caught up with prices. They're uneasy about artificial intelligence, tariffs, and trade disputes. They see the world as dangerous and unstable. And they're suspicious because they attribute much of America's economic mess to Joe Biden. Absent a Democratic agenda, many of them won't be convinced that Democrats would be better at governing. To maximize their victories, the Democrats' agenda must move closer to the center and away from the fever swamps of the far left. The victory of Zohran Mamdani as New York mayor has grabbed the attention of party activists. It will encourage copycat primary candidates. He and his socialist experiments will draw national attention this year. That won't be helpful in November. His vision is unpopular outside a few deep blue enclaves. Truth be told, it isn't all that popular even in New York City. Of voters there, 65% are registered Democrats and 11% are Republicans. Mr. Mamdani won only 50.8% of the vote. The more left-wing candidates triumph in primaries, the more Democrats everywhere will have to explain where they stand on the left's more controversial ideas. The outcome of the battle inside the Democratic Party is crucial. Playing defense doesn't win elections. Neither does demanding the abolition of immigration and customs enforcement. That cry could become as damaging to Democrats as defund the police. It reinforces that Democrats support open borders and protecting violent, criminal, illegal aliens. Better to condemn individual ICE actions and call for dramatic reforms than to appeal soft again on crime and illegal immigration. Democrats have also made a huge mistake defending men's participation in women's sports and availing themselves of the ladies' restroom. Many up-for-grab voters are unsettled when Democrats can't define the word woman or acknowledge that men can't give birth. These Democrats look like kooks. Another worrying sign for Democrats: voters trust congressional Republicans more than congressional Democrats on critical issues. A journal poll this month found that voters think Republican lawmakers are best able to handle the economy by 38% to 32% for Democrats. On inflation, same numbers. On immigration, it's 44% Republicans, 33% Democrats. On foreign policy, 38% Republicans, 33% Democrats. Finally, Democrats face a structural problem. They have fewer easy targets this year. Presidents typically carry in on their coattails a bunch of their party's candidates in marginal seats. Not so Mr. Trump. Republicans lost 2 House seats in 2024. Democrats must do what they've never done during the Trump era: emphasize a governing agenda rather than fierce denunciations of the president. Talk less about him and more about the needs of ordinary Americans. Stay away from the far left. Show common sense. It shouldn't be hard to do, but it is. That's why Democrats are still in a jam. Mr. Rove was senior advisor and deputy chief of staff for President George W. Bush and is author of The Triumph of William McKinley. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We're planning for the wrong AI job disruption. If artificial intelligence takes over some of your tasks, that doesn't render you unemployable. By Stephen LeWarn. Washington is bracing for an artificial intelligence employment shock that is unlikely to arrive, and so the government risks spending billions of dollars preparing for the wrong problem. Panicked politicians are making the error of treating task-based occupational rankings, which estimate what share of various jobs task AI could perform, as unemployment forecast. History suggests the opposite approach. AI is likely to increase the productivity and wages of many of these roles long before it eliminates them. Task automation typically reorganizes work well before it destroys jobs, if it does the latter at all. This misunderstanding is pushing policy in the wrong direction. Headlines, policy briefs, and congressional hearings treat Goldman Sachs' widely cited 2023 estimate that roughly 300 million jobs worldwide are exposed to generative AI as a prediction that AI will eliminate many of those jobs. The Goldman Sachs figure is derived from occupational task list and asks whether an AI system could perform some portion of employees' current tasks: summarizing documents, drafting routine text, coding standard functions, or analyzing familiar data sets. Many politicians and commentators assume that if AI can perform some of a job's task, the role will disappear. But the distinction between task repricing, when technology can take over all or part of a task, and job destruction isn't semantic, it is economic. When technology lowers the cost of performing specific tasks by lifting some of the load, firms reorganize production. Workers specialize differently. Demand expands in ways that task-based rankings don't capture. Consider how this plays out in practice. A paralegal, whose job includes summarizing depositions, reviewing contracts, and organizing discovery, may score as highly exposed in a task-based ranking. But automating first-pass document review doesn't eliminate the paralegal's job. It reorganizes it. Work shifts from routine document scanning to higher value work, such as flagging anomalies and managing client interactions. The same pattern appears across professions. In accounting, software has automated large portions of bookkeeping and tax preparation without eliminating accountants who have moved up the value chain toward advisory, forensic, and judgment-intensive work. In nursing, AI tools increasingly handle documentation and monitoring alerts, freeing clinicians to spend more time on patient care rather than replacing them. The logic of the Goldman Sachs estimate is similar to that underlying academic studies tracing back to the Fry-Osborne framework, which classifies occupations by susceptibility to computerization. It's the same method behind the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's 2023 Employment Outlook, which reports that roughly 1/4 of jobs across advanced economies are highly exposed to AI-driven automation, another report that has raised political alarm. These studies' approaches have a common structure. They map technologies onto tasks rather than onto labor market outcomes. When repurposed as forecast of displacement, they are asked to do something for which they were never designed. That is why both the OECD and Goldman Sachs explicitly caution in their reports that measures of AI exposure describe task susceptibility, not forecast of job lost. A job that scores as 40% exposed to AI in these rankings doesn't have a 40% chance of vanishing. It is more likely to be reorganized. Technology automates, accelerates, or reduces the cost of specific tasks within a job, allowing employees to spend more time on higher value activities. As a result, output expands and wages often rise. Software developers, for instance, routinely use AI tools to generate boilerplate code, test functions, and debug routines, tasks that once consumed hours. The result isn't fewer developers, but developers producing more complex systems faster, with demand for experienced talent rising rather than falling. As technology accelerates tasks and reduces cost, companies also create roles that task-based rankings like those from Goldman Sachs and the OECD cannot see. Law firms increasingly rely on litigation support managers and AI review specialists who oversee automated document analysis rather than review the papers manually. Accounting firms have expanded their roles in data assurance, model oversight, and advisory services, which sit alongside automated reporting. In software teams, engineers now specialize in system architecture, model integration, and quality control, roles that expand as routine coding becomes automated. In healthcare, AI-assisted documentation has increased demand for employees who can lead clinical operations by managing data flows, compliance, and workflow design. These jobs exist because of how AI reorganizes work. Policymakers' misunderstanding jeopardizes those gains. Washington is racing to fund broad AI retraining initiatives on the premise that mass white-collar layoffs are imminent. Federal workforce initiatives, including AI-focused retraining grants layered onto existing programs such as Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, increasingly assume occupational collapse rather than within job adaptation. But if AI primarily augments tasks rather than replaces jobs, this approach misses the mark. Workers don't need to be rescued from their professions. They need room to adapt within them. This is where retraining could help, but only if it is targeted. While AI won't destroy occupations in the manner politicians imagine, some workers will adapt more easily than others. AI rewards those with judgment, domain knowledge, and machine output. It penalizes those in rigidly designed jobs, such as narrowly scripted clerical or call center work. Blanket retraining schemes don't account for these nuances. Large-scale retraining programs have a mixed record, even when displacement is real. When displacement is overstated, such programs risk doing harm. They pull workers out of productive roles, subsidize credentials with little demonstrated labor market value, and signal panic to firms and households alike. That panic can become self-reinforcing. Companies delay hiring. Workers delay investment in firm-specific skills. And productivity-enhancing reorganization slows. The result is a policy-induced drag on growth and adaptation. AI will disrupt labor markets, but disruption isn't synonymous with destruction. The danger isn't that AI will eliminate work faster than society can adapt. It is that governments will intervene where they shouldn't and neglect where they should help. In preparing for an employment shock that won't come, Washington risks wasting billions of dollars only to slow the adaptation that makes technological change a boon for jobs. Mr. Lawar is a professor of economics and finance at Franciscan University of Steubenville, Ohio. Letters to the editor. In money or health, measles cost is too high. Your editorial, Measles as a Cost of Doing Business, January 22nd, rightly rejects Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Principal Deputy Director Ralph Abraham's dismissive framing of the current measles resurgence as the cost of doing business. However, as a professor of health policy, I'd argue his response isn't only a failure of ethics, it's also economically illiterate. In any successful enterprise, preventable losses are identified and eliminated. They aren't accepted as overhead. The math here is devastating. A single measles case costs taxpayers an estimated $30,000 to $50,000 in public health response, including contact tracing and emergency vaccinations. With over 2,200 cases last year, the public had to pay roughly $70 million to $110 million to curb a disease we successfully eliminated in 2000. Further, blaming porous borders is a distraction when fewer than 2% of cases are imported. The real cost includes subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, a delayed and fatal brain disease that strikes the very infants too young to be vaccinated. If this is the new business model of the CDC, American parents should prepare for a bankruptcy of public trust. Another letter, Trump's Greenland Gambit, a once in 70 years moment. I am 70 years old, and I never thought I would read the January 16 headline, Europe reinforces Greenland to deter U.S., accompanied by a photo of a Royal Danish Navy vessel and the description that North Atlantic Treaty Organization allies are assisting Denmark in building up military and diplomatic assets on Greenland. President Trump overplayed his hand. Worse, the folks in Moscow and Beijing were smiling as his threats did their work for them, weaken the Western alliance. It is past time to reset and to pursue with our allies what are surely mutually beneficial goals. From Jonathan M. Schmierling, Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania. The mortgage rates compared to last week and this week. A 30-year mortgage was 6.20%, now 6.24%. A 15-year mortgage fixed was 5.60%, now 5.67%. Jumbo mortgages were 6.40%, now 6.39%. A 5-year adjustable mortgage was 5.91%, now 5.79%. A new car loan was 6.85%, now 6.93%. The Pepper and Salt cartoon today shows a couple standing outside a home as the wife is ringing the doorbell and the man is carrying what appears to be a bottle of wine. And he says, "Can we leave yet?" You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the January 29th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal. We read from the Wall Street Journal every Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. Your reader has been Corrine. Thank you for listening, and stay warm and safe.